July, this next Saturday. So we don't have service, so no service next Saturday, 4th of July. And then I mentioned a bit ago that we'll be switching up the age groups for the Loft and the Lookout. The new age groups will be 3 through 7 and 8 until you get to high school. So with that change, we will need willing and loving church members to regularly volunteer so that we can make this change possible. There will be a calendar in the back, and it's actually already up there, where you can sign up just to help out, and that change starts next Sunday, which is July 5th. And if you'd like more details, please see me after service, but basically, if you just can look ahead for the weeks coming, and if there's ever a Sunday that you have on your heart that you want to help out, then just write your name down. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Diane, remind me, I want to ask Rick to switch those 2 bulletin boards, because it's too hard to get to the calendar when you have to go past Sergeant Stas back there in order to get to it. I don't need any more barriers between people and volunteering, so we need to make it more accessible, more easy. I want to move it on over there. We started a new series, I wanted to say, in the Thursday night Bible study. So we had, now this past week, I think we had more present in the room than in the Zoom, right? Is that right? Can't remember. You were Zooming, you were Zooming. Was that it? Just the 3 of you, I think? Okay. So we had more. But anyway, it's usually about a 50-50 split, which makes it interesting. But if you want to zoom in, please zoom in. Oh, I unplugged my cross. Can't do that. So please come in. But we just started, and we're just getting into it. We're in the 3rd week of, well, we will be in the 3rd week of it. We started to do something on prayer. And what we're doing is we're going through the Apostles' prayers. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I always get yelled at in the car on the way home when I do. But the apostles pray a lot. We know that because they're always praying in the book of Acts. But we never see their prayers in the book of Acts. If you want to see the apostles' prayers, you have to look at their letters. And so we're going to run over there and kind of look at theirs. And we're going to compare that also with the model prayers we see coming from Jesus. We see Jesus' prayers a few times in the Gospels, but not so much the apostles. And this is all leading up to probably coming in July. I hate to make a commitment yet, but in July, I believe, towards the end of July, I want to have another prayer circle. And I say another one because some of you may remember we're going to be doing that. And right that Friday that we were going to do the prayer circle, church got shut down. Now, Victoria and I actually still came that night. We didn't tell anybody, but we were here. So we had a prayer circle of 2. It was great, by the way. It was absolutely great. But I want more people next time. But this is all kind of leading up to that because in the prayer circle, the idea is that we're going to be kind of lifting up prayers the way we just lifted up songs. We're going to get in a circle and everybody's going to, not necessarily, it won't be the same prayer, but that's the idea. And I want people to feel comfortable with that. And so that's where we're kind of looking at some prayers. When you read the apostles' prayers, they're kind of pithy. They're not very long or drawn out, and should be encouraging. It doesn't really matter how well you speak if you speak from the heart. So that's what the purpose kind of leading up into this is. So we're going through this Bible. So you don't have to be coming to the prayer circle to join us about prayer, but we're going to be talking about prayer because kind of from a biblical standpoint. There's a lot of teaching on prayer. I'm not sure how much of it's real or true, but there's a lot of teaching on it. I'm trying to just find the biblical stuff, so that's what we're going through. Okay, and that's it, right? Okie dokie. So, yeah, we're getting ready to get started then. Are we broadcasting? Long ago. Okay, so if you're broadcasting, you're joining us, please say hi in the comments so we know you're there. Let's get started. Long ago. Okay, so we are continuing. We have 2 more after today on this. In case you're wondering, there's 10 sermons in this series. And we're taking the book of Daniel, we're comparing it to the series Survivor on CBS. And it does seem like every season, there's certain types that always get cast on Survivor. There's always a crazy guy. And I don't know why it's always a crazy guy. And the women go crazy by the guys before the shows are over, but usually it starts out there'll be one just nutso kind of guy. And one of the most colorful characters was this guy named Ralph, a.k.a. the Rooster.
Ralph, you had a huge reaction.
They ain't offered to get in the water yet to catch a fish, but they're willing to eat every piece you bring in.
One more time.
I think you said she's not helping at all to do anything catch fish but eat it.
Nah.
Ralph, that ring true to you, how important it is that the entire group be cohesive?
Well, first, Jeff, I don't know what cohesive means.
Well, in your job, you manage a group of guys, right?
Yes.
Would you rather have a dozen guys who were really strong but didn't get along very well, or a dozen guys maybe not as strong, but man, do they work well as a unit?
I disagree.
It's a question. Which would you rather have?
Get up on there and crow. The rooster, baby.
Heard me? One more time.
Okay, he actually woke up his tribe every day crowing. He got voted out pretty early in the game. Go figure. But anyways, that's Ralph. Actually a sweet guy, just hard to understand. They actually started subtitling him by the end of the series because it's like you couldn't understand what he's saying. All right, so in the book of Daniel, we have a crazy dude. We do. Crazier than Ralph. Let me introduce you to him. In fact, you've already met him. His name is Nebuchadnezzar. Like, what? What's this all about? So I talked about this last week because last week we talked about the famous story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which Daniel wasn't part of. So this is Daniel's personal biography, and he took time out to tell somebody else's story, which is cool. But this is even weirder because this is an entire book, almost as you can almost see it's like a pamphlet. You know, in those days, that would have been a pretty big book because it was very expensive, printed up and handed out to people. And Daniel kind of took it and put it in his notebook. So this pamphlet is literally written by King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I doubt he wrote it by his physical hand. He may have. But we see it start out, the very first, we switch from, this story of the fiery furnace from last week, and you flip the page over, and it starts out, King Nebuchadnezzar writes. It's like, what? He took over the book. To the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. What a great little thing he's doing here. It's my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs? How many are his wonders? His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His domination endures from generation to generation. What in the world is going on here? Right in the middle of the book of Daniel. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar is a pagan king. He conquered Jerusalem. He boasted that his God had destroyed the temple and therefore beaten the God of the Israelites. And he took a group of the best and brightest to take them to Babylon and reprogram them, kind of indoctrinate them in the ways of the great kingdom of Babylon. It was an empire by that time. And he was going to send them back to become the rulers in Jerusalem for Babylon. Right? They're going to be their own people. So we took Daniel and his friends and all of those people they were with, and they're going to turn them into people just like the Babylonians. Instead, what happens by chapter 4 is we have Nebuchadnezzar praising Jehovah. This is a pretty remarkable thing. And in fact, we've seen a lot of things happen that Nebuchadnezzar's been party to. He's seen every miracle that's gone on, and he has an idea of who God is, but we'll see in this chapter, he really gets a full taste of God. So then he tells his story. He starts by saying, bless you all. I have to tell you about this great God, Jehovah. So pretty remarkable. And he says this, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace. Where else would the king be, right? And as I was lying in bed, images and vision passed through my mind, and they terrified me. Now, this isn't the first time that's happened to him. He seems to be one of these people that has those dreams that are a little bit scary, like my wife. Don't talk to her about her dreams. She will frighten you. Her dreams are scary. So I commanded all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream. We've seen this before, right? We kind of got started with this whole thing with a dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And so he's going to list the people that he brings before him. I brought the magicians, the enchanters, the astrologers, and diviners. I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Like, This sounds really familiar, actually, going back to chapter 2. He got so angry at them in chapter 2 that they couldn't interpret the dream, he was going to kill them all. And that's when Daniel stepped forward and says, let me talk to my God. I think it's your interpretation, right? That's what happens in chapter 2. And after Daniel's able to do what no one else can do, and not only told him interpretation, but told him the dream too, Nebuchadnezzar bows before him, calls his God great and holy, and gives him gold and position and power, and promotes his friends to become governors of Dura. That all took place already. Here we are, he's got a terrible, terrible dream, and he lists everybody he brought in, and not one of them's named Daniel. Does that seem weird to you? Why? Why in the world? So finally, when they all fail, finally, he says, at the end, Daniel came to my presence, and I told him a dream. And he says, people might get confused. He goes, I call him Belshazzar. That's the name I gave him. But his name's really Daniel. So he even knows. He didn't become Babylonian. His name's Daniel. But I'm thinking, Daniel's last? How in the world is Daniel not on speed dial by this point, right? When it comes to dreams, you're thinking, Daniel's your guy. I mean, if you need to, pull up Siri. Ask Siri. Siri could get you to Daniel.
Daniel, the servant of the Most High God, is currently inspecting crops on the plains of Dura. Would you like me to call him?
See, Siri knows. Everybody knows where Daniel is. By now, you would think that Nebuchadnezzar would always track where Daniel was in case he had a bad dream. Instead, he goes there last. What in the world is going on there? How can Nebuchadnezzar forget Daniel and Daniel's God? Why would he go last? Well, see, what's happened is that deception has seeped into Nebuchadnezzar. Now, he's seen the truth. He knows the truth. He has proclaimed the truth with his own mouth more than once in public ways, and yet right now he goes back to his old ways. He's going to call the Chaldeans back in. He's going to call the magicians back in. He's going to call all the king's horses and all the king's men back in. Anybody but Daniel. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar has slipped back into this world where he's God. See, because that's what they taught in Babylon. He wasn't just the king. He was the God. We see this in almost same thing with Rome. Romans believed their emperors were kings. Egyptian believed they were kings. If you want to know why young men would fly Jap Zeros into battleships in World War II, is because they believed their emperor was God. Right? They believed all these people, like they're not just kings, they're like gods. And so Nebuchadnezzar knows better by now. He knows who the real God is. But he's been listening to a lot of people tell him, oh, great king, live forever. What does that mean, live forever? Gods live forever, not humans. And so he's kind of slipped back into that. And deception has kind of slipped in. And deception is one of these things. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about deception today because it's deceitful and it slides in when you're not looking. You have to be vigilant always to keep deception out of your lives. It's very, very, very easy for it to slip in. And actually, deception is something that will get you, and before you know it, you're going back to your old ways. You know better. You do know better. You know what God really wants, and you know what the old ways get you, but somehow you end up right back where you were. What in the world makes somebody return to a lie? Now, this is something that has plagued pastors forever. Because I've had people come into this church building, and I've had them have these moments when it's like God spoke to me, and my heart is, I see things now for the first time ever. I'm going to take God more seriously, and then you see them do it. It's amazing. We baptize some of them we don't, but because they didn't ask for it. But I'm just saying, they come in, it's like this transformation happens. And it's great. And then all of a sudden, they're gone. But before they left, they friended me on Facebook, so I get to see what's going on in their lives. And like they're already back where they were. They're not changed at all. What happened? Why, when you know the truth, and you told me you knew the truth, it like revealed, like freed you, and you're so happy, why in the world do you go back? Well, the Bible actually has this really great verse about this in Proverbs. As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their foolishness. I know this is a gross verse, but if anybody has a dog, they do that, don't they? In fact, my dog sometimes has vomited, and when that happens, I have to get him out of the room. He'll try to eat it. Okay, and like, okay, you start eating that, we're both going to be vomiting, and then it's no good at all. Get out of the room, I'll clean it up. He's coming back over. This is somehow dogs come back to it. And in the same way, humans keep coming back to their lies, which, by the way, is no greater in God's sight than vomit. But we come back to them again and again and again. How does that happen? Well, deception begins when truth gets replaced by suggestion. That's where it begins. It's not where it stops, but that's where it begins. A suggestion, just a little suggestion. A lot of people think the devil's just a liar. He's not. He's a deceiver too. In fact, he's a better deceiver than a liar. He'd rather deceive you than lie to you. Because what happens with deception is a little tiny suggestion gets planted somewhere. And it can come from many different ways. And when it gets there, it gets mixed with whatever's driving you most. For some people, that's fear. For some, it's pride. For some, it's lust or desire. But there's something that drives you. We all have drivers, right, that drive us more than other things. And for some people, though, it is fear. I'm going to take us to a place where we see this really well in action. I've gone here before. I've preached on this very subject before. But I want to show it to you again and again and again and again. Because this is, I think, just a great example of deception. Because it's not a lie. It's deception. This goes back into the days of Joseph. I'm going to jump over back in the Bible to Joseph. Set up, for those of you who may not remember the story, what's happened is Joseph is a favorite son of his father. Father just loves him, favors him over all of his other sons. Not a brilliant thing to do if you're a parent, but he did it openly anyway. And one of the things he did, he gave his magnificent coat, the coat of many colors. A very famous thing. They have a Broadway play, Joseph and his Technicolor dream coat. Is like a very famous thing, this beautiful coat that he had. It would be like, I don't know, some kind of a Calvin Klein tuxedo or something. It's just, which is senseless to give to goat herders, but he's got this beautiful coat. And his brothers hate him. His brothers are out working. Joseph doesn't have to do that because he's kind of pampered, kind of sitting at home, drawing in the dirt or whatever he's doing, And his father goes, you should be out with your brothers. And so he makes up an excuse, an errand to send him on. Hey, go take this note to your brothers, or whatever, and go check on them to see how they're doing. Like, you should be there. Every other person's out there working except Joseph. Joseph's at home doing whatever Joseph's doing. So he's kind of gently trying to push him out to be with the brothers because he'd like to see them all getting together. It doesn't work very well, though. He goes out there. His brothers see him coming. They hate him so badly they decide to kill him. They take him. They throw him in a pit. They take his coat off because, of course, they hate that coat. They saw that coming from a mile away. They hate him. They resent him. And they said, no, you know what? Why would we kill him from getting nothing? Let's sell him as a slave. Let's get some money. But now they have to somehow go back, and their father's going to ask, did you see Joseph? Now, he doesn't know that they saw Joseph, right? Because nobody knows that. Nobody has telephones. There's no cell phones being taken pictures. He sent Joseph to them, but there's no way he could have known if he got there. So they hatch this plan. They take it, they rip it up like it was ripped by an animal, and they take goat's blood, and they put it on it, and then they bring it to their father. And I want you to see very carefully what they say to their father. They bring this coat to their father, and they said, we found this. Please examine it and to see whether or not it's your son's tunic. We found this out in the field. Go figure. Wonder where that came from. No, we never saw Joseph. But we see this tunic that kind of looks like his. Well, there's only one like it in the world, right? Could you look at us and tell us, is it his? They don't tell him they found blood on it. They don't tell him it's ripped. They say, we found it in a field. Could you tell us if it's his? And so they hold it up. And this is the response we get from his father. He recognized it. It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Surely been torn to pieces? Hey, I've watched CSI. There's a lot of evidence here that's not adding up, right? There's a lot of reasons that we might think maybe he hasn't been torn to pieces. Maybe he's even okay. Maybe he's even lying in a ditch somewhere. Or maybe we should question these guys a little bit more about where they found this. He doesn't do any of those things. He jumps to a conclusion. Surely he's been torn to pieces. And he goes to crying. He just starts weeping. And later they actually start feeling bad about what they've done just because it's hurt his father. And all his daughters arose to comfort him. He refused to be comforted. He says, surely I will go to my death mourning for my son. And so his father wept for him. here's what happened in this particular case. The suggestion from Satan through the sons mixed with his fear, and deception was complete. See, when he sent him out, there was probably part of him thought, oh, I hope he finds them. I hope he doesn't get lost along the way. And Joseph does get lost along the way, by the way. Somebody else has to point him over to where he has to go. He's just kind of wandering around. He's a bit of a dreamer, that Joseph. And so he must have been thinking, oh, I hope this is the right thing to do. I hope he'll be all right. And he sent him off, and he sees that his worst fear came to roost. Surely he's been killed. And so it was just a suggestion. It was just a little tiny hint of a suggestion. There was nothing untrue with what they said. They found this. Is this his coat? That's not even a lie. That's the truth. But when it gets mixed with his fear, deception takes hold. And for years, he will live believing his son was died, and he sent him to his death. This is how Satan works. Satan is not just a liar. He is also a deceiver. In fact, we see this in Revelation. That's how they finally refer to him. That ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who deceives the whole world. He's deceptive. And that's really, really, see, the thing you have to understand is a lie wounds, but deception, oh, that will enslave you. A lie may hurt you, but deception is what gets somebody to strap C4 to their chest and walk into a cafe and kill women and children. That's deception. That's not a lie. That's deception. They believe they have some suggestion that's been mixed with whatever it is that drives them, and that has deceived them. And that's what happens. And what happens is we start looking at what we see instead of listening to what God says. We see this happen in the very first deception that ever takes place. It takes place in the Garden of Eden. And what does the Bible say? When Eve looked and saw that the fruit looked good, she took it and ate. She was told it wasn't good to eat it, but she looked and she saw that the fruit was good, and so she took it and ate. Everywhere in the Bible you'll see this take place, where there's a little tiny thing that's some even partial truth sometimes, but it gets mixed with whatever drives the person, and they become deceived. When you become deceived, the devil can get you to do anything. Lie's not as good. That's why he'd rather deceive you than lie to you. Someone who's lied to you, here's how you know the difference. If somebody is believing a lie, all you have to do is confront them with the truth, and they'll go, oh. It might take them a while. They might not want to admit it, but faced with the truth, they'll say, yeah, that's okay. I get that now. But when you take someone who's deceived and you confront them with the truth, they get angry at you because they can't let go of it because it's now part of them. In fact, what's happened is the lie they've told themselves becomes the truth that they tell to you. It's very, very hard to talk to someone who's deceived because they're looking at you and they believe they're telling us the truth. So how do we get stuck in here? Well, fear's one of them. Fear's a good way that Satan deceives us. A lot of times we're driven by fear. Listen, every morning my wife wakes up and she can start the day thinking I love her or that I don't. And throughout the day, whichever parameter she starts the day with, she'll find facts to believe it. It's true. She's laughing because she knows it's true, right? She can wake up believing I don't love her, and that day will prove to her I do not love her. There'll be 100 things I do that day that'll prove it. She could also wake up believing she's loved, and all day long she'll see that I love her. Because the devil will drive us, right? It's depending on what our focus is, and whether we're listening to what God's telling us, or we're just going to go what we see. And a lot of times it's what we've seen. You know, we look longingly at the past. You know, we see this all the time too. I do this. I look at the past and I remember the fun that I had before we opened a church. I used to have weekends off. That was fun, you know. Kind of look back at those days longingly. Isn't it funny how all the pain sometimes goes away from the past and all that's left are the good memories? I don't know why that is, but it seems that's why people sit and talk about the good old days, you know. I had somebody, it used to be cars were so much better. It was great. We could work on them. We could fix them ourselves. Yeah, you had to. An engine never lasted more than 60,000 miles. You're always replacing things. Now the engines go 200,000 miles. Was it really better then? Nah. You know, there's a lot of things you look back on just longingly. It was so much better then, you know. And sometimes we're really just deceiving ourselves. And sometimes We're just focusing on what we want to focus on. So those of you who know me know I have this peculiar thing. I don't know why. Pork and I don't get along. It's not a religious thing. It's just I can't eat pork. I wish I could. I love bacon. I love ham. And every now and then I will do it anyway. I will pay the price for it about 20 minutes later. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but you can guess 20 minutes later I'm paying a price. So every now and then we got maybe after church or something eating, and I open up the menu, and I'm one of these people that order by picture. I don't care what the words say. Find me the good looking picture. I want that. Always disappointed when it doesn't look like that when it comes to, you know. And one thing I really like is that. When I was in high school, I was a busboy at Howard Johnson's restaurant, and I had that every day that I worked. I loved it. This, for those of you who don't know the glory of this is a turkey club sandwich. What's not to love? First of all, 3 pieces of bread is just genius, right? And you got bacon and turkey, and then you put those toothpicks in them, which make it seem just so high class. And then they would put fries in there for me instead of that. It was just like, that's the best sandwich. I love them. And every now and then we'll go out to eat somewhere, and I open up and, oh, there's a turkey club sandwich. Now I used to eat these all the time. I love turkey club sandwiches, and I'll order it sometimes. And Victoria will look across at me, are you ordering bacon? Yep. That has bacon on it. Of course it's bacon on it, honey. You got to have bacon on it. It's not turkey club without bacon. I know it has bacon on it. That's why I'm ordering it, you know. I'm just going to have that. And then, you know, we'll go to the next, like usually we'll do, like we're out shopping, and then I'll be texting her from the men's room. I'm going to be a little while. Go ahead and check out. I'll catch up with you at the car. And it's like, oh, yeah, now I remember why I don't have those. But it's like we do that. We have these like fond memories of the past, and it looks so good all of a sudden to us. And we say, you know, I want that again. That's what I want again. It doesn't matter how stupid it was. It doesn't matter how bad it got to. I just want that because I'm kind of remembering it. That was a good time. When I was in high school, I kid you not, this is actually a T-shirt that people wore. I don't know if you can read that. Party till you puke, okay? This was a T-shirt that kids wore, like on Fridays when party time was coming. Party till you puke. Now, I used to walk the halls and see this and think, who wants to do that, you know? Why in the world would I want to do that? And if you talk to these people, it's, well, you just have to do it because, you know, it's just you're having such a great time. It's just like you're with your friends and everything's just so great. And yeah, you puke, but other than that, you know. Now, one time in my life, really, I didn't really party till I puked. I was on a business thing. It was a bunch of salespeople, and we were all in some kind of fancy Mexican restaurant. And for some reason, they started ordering shots for everybody. And everybody's kind of challenging other people to do the shots. And the guy I was with was an older fellow, and we were like paired up. You know, he was my sales guy, I was his tech guy, and there was about 5 of us staying in this one house, and he was driving. He says, I can't do these. You know, not anymore. I can't do them at all. And I didn't want him to, you know, take the. I said, you know, just give yours to me. I'll take yours. And so he would just like slide him over. I don't know how many shots I had that night. Way too many. But I was fine until I stood up. I was doing all right. And then I stood up, and I go, oh, boy. And it was someplace in California. It was like on a beach. And so I told Paul, I says, okay, I'm going to get in the back seat near the window. And let's hope we can get to he said, I'll get you there. Don't you worry. You know, you took everybody's shots, literally taking a shot for the team. I took lots of them. So we did not make it there. In fact, this is one of the times where you go for distance, not for style, put down the window and hit your head out. And then we got there, and I wasn't any better. And I spent most of my night on my hands and knees by the porcelain altar. Those of you who've been in this situation know what I'm talking about. It was horrible, right? Not one time, not for 1 minute or second, I think, oh yeah, I achieved my goal. I partied till I puked. I wasn't happy about this at all, right? There wasn't any part of me that thought this was good. And I thought, do people really go out at night thinking, I'm going to keep going until I hit this point? Because this was like one of the most miserable points of my life. I mean, it was just such a miserable. I didn't sleep at all, really, that night. I can't even describe to you how hard it was to get through that night. And yet, I looked this up in the Urban Dictionary. This is modern and updated, right? On it to vomit. That's not what it's called. It's not party to puke. We're still rhyming stuff. It's on it to vomit. And this is actually said to drink a lot and or binge on drugs until you vomit, throw up, or be sick, or generally feel ill. Usually after this, you get back on it. People have regularly counted to 10 and started again. What? Who does this, right? Why would you do this? Why would you brag about it the next day or the next week? Well, the answer is because there was a time before all this when you were enjoying yourself. And as time passes, that's all you remember. And as weird as it is, I use this disgusting example because everything we do is disgusting in God's sight. Because we run to this sin that we might as well be doing this in God's sight because that's what it looks like to him. You know better. Come on. Didn't I save you? Didn't I pull you out of this muck? Why are you running back to it? I brought you out of that. You thanked me for delivering you, and now you're trying to find ways back in? What are you doing? But we know better this, but do we? Do we really know better? Because Jesus said this. He said, look, in John 8, he says, you shall know the truth shall make you free. Okay, so I know the truth. The truth is Jesus. And he'll make me free. But that's not how this works. Because we see in Philippians 3:10, Paul says this amazing thing. You know what? I just want to know him. I do all this that I may know him. Now, how is Paul in Philippians saying, I just want to know him? I thought you knew him. Didn't he save you? Did you have this Damascus Road experience? Haven't you been performing miracles in his name? What do you mean you don't know him? And see, that's the difference between what we mean by the word know and a Jew means by the word know. Because to know in the Jewish culture is not to know something up here. It's to know it here. To know in the Jewish culture is to be intimate with it. You guys know this, right? In the book of Genesis, there's this very famous phrase that sometimes gets quoted for laughs. And Adam knew Eve, and Eve conceived a child. And people say, did you know her in the biblical sense? That's what they mean. It's not the biblical sense, it's the Jewish sense. The word to know in the Jewish culture means to know intimately. It doesn't have to mean sexually. It just means intimately. I know that person on an intimate level, right? So a Jew would never say that they know their neighbor. They got another word for that. They don't know their neighbor. They're just like, there's somebody I say hi to. I wave at when I get in my car and drive away. I know people who I know everything about in my life. And what Paul's saying is, I still don't know Jesus enough. I need to know him better. If I get to know him even better, that's what I want. I just want to get to know him on every possible level. I want to know everything he's thinking, everything he's feeling. I want to know Jesus. I want to understand him. I want to know him. I want to be like him. That's knowing in a Jewish sense. If you know Jesus like that, you're free. If you simply know who Jesus is, you're nothing. The Bible says even demons know that. Are they saved? See, we don't get saved by Jesus just by saying, yeah, I kind of have this idea he's the Son of God. We get saved by Jesus by saying we're intimately knowledgeable of each other. He knows my thoughts, and I'm beginning to know his. Right? We share emotions. When Jesus cries, I weep too. See, that's knowing in the way Paul's talking about. Do we really know the truth? Because if we really knew the truth, we could never be deceived again. And yet we still seem to manage it. Deception is complete when the lie you tell yourself becomes the truth you tell others. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar returned to the Chaldeans because they told him he was God. That's what he wanted. He had a real problem with this. A lot of people who are in power have that problem. And so he wanted to believe he was God again. The problem with liars, though, is that you really can't trust them very well. Because the lies they're telling you, they're telling other people, and it gets to a point where you're saying, okay, I really wanted to keep going like we were going because this feels good. I feel good about myself. But now I need a person who's going to tell me the truth. So all you Chaldeans get out. I'm going to finally call Daniel. And I'm going to have Daniel tell me what this dream means because this dream terrifies me and I don't know why. So he calls Daniel in, getting back to Daniel, finally at long last. And he says, Belteshazzar, chief of magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. This is a guy, I'm telling you, I would always call first. I wish I had that guy on my staff. Here is my dream, and interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying on my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land, and his height was enormous. And he goes on and on and on and on. Let me give you the Reader's Digest of his dream. This big tree grows up, huge. And then somebody comes, a voice, a very powerful voice, was somebody of importance, said, chop it down. And he chopped the tree down. The tree fell in the grass, and the tree began to eat the grass like an animal, crawling around eating it. And so that was basically the dream. It goes on some more details. You can read that if you want. And so at the very end, he says, okay, now tell me the meaning. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means. For none of the wise men, none of the king's horses, none of the king's men in my kingdom could interpret it for me, but you can, because the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. And Daniel kind of looks at him like, yeah, right.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Pretty much that's what Daniel says to him. You don't want the answer to this one. That last one I had was not a bad dream. I give you that one. This one's not so good. And then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was appalled. He went white when he heard the dream, because he instantly knew what it meant, because God revealed it to him. And his thoughts alarmed him. He didn't even want to say what he saw. And the king says, don't worry. Don't let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. And Belteshazzar says, my lord, I wish this dream was about your enemies. That's how bad it is. I wish I could tell you this is a horrible dream, but it's for your enemies and not you. I wish that, but I cannot. That tree you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached the sky, was visible to all the earth, whose foliage was beautiful, its fruit abundant, in which there was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and whose branches the birds of the sky lodged. Yeah, it's you, O king. For you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. I'm liking it so far, Daniel. Keep going. This sounds great. Yes, that's who I am. Now I see it. It's me for sure. But here's the interpretation, O king. And this is the decree from the Most High God. You will be driven away from mankind. Your dwelling place will be like the beasts of the field. You'll be given grass to eat like cattle. You'll be drenched with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is the ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it to whomever he wishes. In other words, the King of Kings makes the king, not you. You have been afforded this lofty position because God has given it to you. No other reason. It's not that you're great, it's he's great. And when you realize that, then this will end. But 7 periods of time are going to pass. We don't know how long that is. It was clearly more than days. Some people believe it was years, or maybe 7 seasons. Certainly, weeks would be a push. It had to be like months or seasons. It's a long time. He's going to be completely out of his mind. And then the good news is it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots. That's the good part of the dream, because that means that your kingdom will be restored to you if you recognize the High King of Heaven. He hasn't taken you out. He's still leaving you there as a possibility. And then he says, so here's what I think you should do. Repent now and beat the rush. This whole thing, God's going to try to bring you to repentance. Why don't you just repent now? This is a horrible thing. This is going to be humiliating on a level that they can't hide. You're going to have to live with this forever. You don't want this to happen to you. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Just repent. Maybe God will be merciful if you just repent now. And he says, yeah, okay. I'll think about that, Daniel. And he shushes him out. Finally, having the interpretation, feeling fine. Time passes. All this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king 12 months later, a whole year later. Maybe he's been trying to watch his pride a little bit, trying to work out on his own, like sometimes we do. You have sin in our life, I'll just try harder, Seems like Nebuchadnezzar was just trying harder. He's walking along. 12 months later, he's walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king reflected and said out loud, is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty? Oops. Because you can only do it by yourself for so long. Sooner or later, that pride that is still there is going to come out. And while the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice from heaven said, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you. And you'll be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field. You'll be given the grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. Immediately, the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from mankind and began eating grass like cattle. Here's the thing that I don't understand. God loves Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, I guess as far as despots go, he's an okay guy, you know. But God loves him. And he has revealed himself to him many times. In fact, later in Jeremiah, he actually says, behold Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. He raised him up for this, to punish the Jews for their disobedience, and also to be tutored by Daniel and his friends about who God was. God wanted him to come to him. We are held accountable for what we know. The good news is God was trying to reach Nebuchadnezzar. The bad news is he was trying to reach Nebuchadnezzar because now he's being held accountable to what he knows. Another king would have been dealt with differently, but God's still trying to reach Nebuchadnezzar. We see this, Jesus talks about this in Luke 12, and this is something that people don't seem to understand. Jesus was no communist, believe me. He had a very strange way of looking at things. His belief is if you've given much, you get more. And if you do something with that, you'll get even more. And that's how he always thinks. But he always held people accountable to what he gave them. He tells this story about this master that goes off, and he tells them, I'm going to come back. When I come back, I'm going to check all my accounts, so I need to make sure you guys are staying on top of everything. And he goes away for a long time. And some of the servants are like, oh, okay, well, he's put us in charge. That's a really great responsibility. And they were diligent with everything he put them in charge of. And when he returned, he makes them princes and governors because he's so proud of them. But then there are others who thought, well, he's gone. We'll have plenty of time to fix things later. And they just did whatever they wanted. They took advantage of their position. They were cruel to other people under them. They got drunk. They had parties with the king, with the master's money. And when the king returns, this is what happens. He takes them and he beats them severely and he casts them out. And then Jesus sums all this up, saying this, the servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready and does not do what the master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. Because from everyone who has been given much, much more will be demanded, and from the one who has been given little, much more, been entrusted much, much will be asked. If I give you something, I expect you to do something with it. And if you don't, guess what Jesus calls that? Sin. This is a scary thing. You know why it's so scary? Because we've been given a lot. This country has been given a lot. It's amazing what this country has. We don't get to stand in front of God on the final day and say, well, I never heard about Jesus. Come on, you go to a football game, if they have them again. There's John 3:16 being held up. I mean, there's Bible on phones for free. And the things that we know, the things that we have, the things that have been given to us is unbelievable. There are going to, I'm telling you, Sodom and Gomorrah will stand up and say, if we had what they had, we would have been different. Nebuchadnezzar is going to say, I didn't even have what they had, and I'm different. Pharaoh is going to stand up and say, if I knew what they knew, because we have been given much, and much is expected of us. James puts it this way. This is Jesus' brother, by the way. Therefore, to him who knows good and does not do it, that's sin to him. It's not if you don't know, but if you know and you don't do it, that's sin. A lot of times we get caught up in this idea that sin's only the things we do that are bad. That's not what Jesus says. That's not what James says. It's not just not doing the stuff that's bad. God gives you talents. He gives you money. He gives you time. He gives you knowledge. He gives you things, and then he brings people in front of you and saying they need your help, and you're not giving it to them. They need your prayers. They need your time. They need your talents. They need your money. I've given you all these things to help them, and you're doing nothing with it. See, that's sin. You sitting in your house and doing nothing is sin, because you know better, he says. This is what he's trying to reach out to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is a king. Proverbs says this: whom the Lord loves, he corrects. So if you're being corrected by God, hallelujah, that means he loves you. But you better listen, because the blows get heavier the further we go on. The problem is we have been given so much, it's almost impossible to ever say to God what I didn't know. Because we know. We do know. Okay, finally, back to Nebuchadnezzar. His body was drenched with the dew of the heaven, and his hair grew like eagle's feathers. His nails looked like bird's claws. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen some of his nails? They grow so long they actually start curling. Oh, it's disgusting. This is what he's looking like. That's what I'm saying. Couldn't have been weeks. It been months, maybe even seasons. But at the end of that time, the final time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, watch this, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my reason returned. God said, you want to know what you are without me? You're like a beast of the field. And that's the way he acted like. For so long, he knew what that felt like. And then when he raised his eyes up to God again, when he raised his eyes up to heaven, his reason returned to him. And suddenly he looked down and saw his hands, and he felt his hair. And he knew who he was, but more importantly, he knew who God was. And I bless the Most High. I praise and honored him who lives forever. Nebuchadnezzar lived forever. That's nuts. I'm not going to live forever. That's the one who's going to live forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth account like nothing, but he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, what have you done? And when I said that, all of my reason returned to me. I wonder what it would take to have our reason return. Nebuchadnezzar is going to get from this, he's going to write all this up. So those people who didn't know this happened, he's going to confess it to everybody. He humbles himself. Prints up this flyer at great expense and sends it to every library he can. He wants everybody to know what happened to him, and he wants to know who did it and who brought him back out of it. He says, I know who the real God is now. And Nebuchadnezzar will kind of disappear from the story after this. You get the impression that he kind of finished out his days a believer in Jehovah, turned his kingdom over, moved on to something else, probably spent out the rest of his days reading the scriptures to figure out who this great God was. He brought Daniel to Babylon to turn him into a Babylonian, and instead Daniel turned him into a devout Jew. This is really, really credible. But I just want to say, this is so cool at the end. He lifts his eyes to heaven, and everything changes. Listen, in your life, you will lift your eyes to heaven. You will. Everybody will. You will lift your eyes to heaven. You will either look at the beginning of your life for direction, or you'll be looking at the end of your life for mercy. But you will look to heaven. The only question is, when? Would you all please pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you for being patient with us. I can't say anything more than what Paul said. We need to know you. We need to know you in a way that tells us everything about you. Lord, we need to know you. I pray that you will give us this heart's desire that we will know you. For I ask this in Jesus' name.